Revelation 2267. From the 18th of March 1942. Serving in love in free will. Continued higher development is guaranteed as long as the beingness is still in bound will, thus walks the course through the works of creation, for it serves, albeit to a certain extent forced into serving activity. However, it is also willing to serve, otherwise it would not have been assigned its activity. The readiness to serve is the first prerequisite for constant higher development. In the stage as a human being, it is again up to the being whether it is lovingly active or not. Its soul is in the state of maturity that the greatest fetter, the bound will, can be replaced by free will, but in return it is no longer forced into a serving activity but has to carry it out of free will, which then only results in the soul's higher development again. And thus this stage is also a certain danger for the human being, that is his soul, if it fails, thus does not use its free will for loving activity. And therefore God has shaped people's entire earthly life such that they need each other to give them the opportunity for one to serve the other. This is truly not arbitrary, and the different living conditions have their wise purpose. They are intended to make it easier for the human being to be of service. He is certainly forced to serve by the circumstances but can nevertheless also resist or do the activity unwillingly, which is, however, evaluated accordingly by God, that is, it impairs the maturing of the soul. For only the serving in love earns the soul the degree of maturity and finally redeems it from bondage. Human life is apparently also a life of necessity, which takes place within the framework of the laws of nature, so that man very often questions the freedom of his will. And yet man possesses much freedom, for he is free to think, act and will, and thus he can also violate the divine order if his impulse is unrestrained and he abandons himself to the dark power. The inner battle against good and evil is left to him without any restriction, and this will be easier or more difficult for him depending on his activity in love, thus he serves with love. Voluntary service in love only makes him truly aware of the freedom of his will, for then he realizes that he is by no means forced to do so, that on the contrary, he is entitled to the same freedom of will for the opposite action. Every lack of love strengthens the will to rule, while every act of love increases the urge to serve in him. And this service is a happy service if it is carried out in free will and love, whereas a service under compulsion, that is against his will, becomes a torment for the human being and revolts him inwardly. Then the human being is controlled by evil force which wants to prevent him from redeeming himself. And that is why earthly life is a responsible one, because there are so many possibilities to be active in serving love that the soul can redeem itself, and these possibilities are not used accordingly. And these opportunities will increase the less people recognize and fulfill their purpose of existence. In order to awaken the feeling of love in them in view of their fellow human beings' great hardship and to motivate them to be of service. Amen.